A vision for education. Ellen's mission to build schools and shape minds. Have you ever noticed how we keep trying to fix symptoms instead of dealing with the actual root problem? Like this, you're in debt so you download a budgeting app. You're gaining weight so you buy a new scale. You feel like your life lacks purpose so you watch 3 more online courses. And in the end, nothing really changes. Here's the thing, you're treating the symptoms, not the root cause. Now imagine this on a historical scale. Late 1870s. A woman looks at an entire generation of young people growing up without direction, without purpose, without the tools to build a meaningful life. And she realizes something that most religious leaders of her time completely missed. Preaching isn't enough. Writing books isn't enough. If you want to truly transform lives, you have to shape character from the foundation. And that's exactly what Ellen White decided to do. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about how education and purpose have become completely disconnected in the modern world. If you're someone who feels like you spent years studying but never really learned how to live with meaning, hit that subscribe button and drop a like if this video helps you. Because today we're going to talk about one of the most radical and practical strategies for social transformation I've ever studied. And it happened more than 140 years ago. Look, to understand what Ellen White did, you need the context. Late 1870s. The United States still recovering from the Civil War. Small towns scattered across the countryside. And Ellen, already in her 50s, traveling constantly through these remote communities. She preached. She wrote. She had influence. But here's what most people don't realize. Ellen started noticing a devastating pattern. The children in those communities? No access to proper education. And when they did have a school, it was the old mechanical memorization model. You know, that thing where kids sit in rows, repeat whatever the teacher says, and learn absolutely nothing of substance? Yeah, not much has changed, right? But worse, there was no moral formation. No purpose. Young people grew up with no idea why they were alive, no spiritual grounding, no practical skills to survive. And Ellen saw something that most religious leaders ignored. You can preach the most powerful sermon in the world. But if a child grows up without education, without character, without foundation, 10 years later, that sermon will mean nothing. Now, you might be thinking, but Nick, couldn't she just build a few schools? She could. But Ellen didn't want to reproduce the broken system that already existed. She wanted to create something radically different. Here's where it gets really interesting. Ellen kept journals. And in one entry from the late 1870s, she wrote something that defines her entire educational philosophy. The mind, the body, and the soul must be trained in harmony. Knowledge without character is not true education. Faith without understanding is incomplete. Read that again. Mind, body, and soul. In harmony. This was revolutionary. Because at that time, education was about stuffing information into the brain. And church was only about faith and prayer. Nobody was connecting the dots. Ellen realized you can't develop a complete human being by training only the intellect. You need to shape the mind, critical thinking, reasoning, academic knowledge. The body, health, physical discipline, practical habits. The soul, character, faith, purpose, connection to something greater. And then something happened that changed her life's direction. One night, Ellen had a vision. And look, I know that might sound strange to some of you. But regardless of what you personally believe, what matters is what she did with that vision. She saw children walking along narrow paths. Some stumbled. Some got lost. No guidance. Then she saw schools. Not ordinary schools. Bright, organized places filled with study and laughter. Teachers guiding students not only in math and reading, but in character, purpose, and life. And a voice said to her, "Prepare the young for service. Teach them to love truth, to respect health, and to honor the Creator in all things. The youth you guide now will be the foundation of my work in the future." This vision ignited something in Ellen. She understood, education is not a side project. It is the project. Because if you want to transform society, you don't do it by converting adults one by one. You do it by forming the next generation with the right values from the beginning. Now here comes the good part, Because Ellen didn't stop at theory. She began writing letters, dozens of them, to leaders of small rural communities, not the big cities. Why? Because she knew real transformation begins at the margins, not the center. And she didn't ask them to build traditional schools. She laid out an entirely new model. Let me give you the numbers and the structure because this matters. Practical skills. Ellen's schools taught agriculture, planting, harvesting, managing the land, cooking, preparing healthy food, nutrition, sewing and manual crafts, creating useful things with one's hands. Why? Because knowledge without practical application is useless. You can read classic literature all day, but if you can't sustain yourself, you are vulnerable. This is human capital investment at its finest. You're giving people tools to be self-sufficient. Intellectual development. And she didn't stop at manual work. Her schools also taught advanced reading, applied mathematics, systematic Bible study, not memorization, real understanding. Here's the math behind it. If you have an illiterate child in a rural community in 1880, the chances of that child repeating the cycle of poverty and lack of purpose are extremely high, let's say 90%. But if you give that child literacy plus practical skills plus character development, you're not changing one life. You're changing 3 generations of that family. The return on investment is exponential. Health and discipline. Here's the genius part. Ellen added to the curriculum early rising, time discipline, regular exercise, strong body, clear mind, fresh air and nature, decades before wellness became a trend. Simple, healthy food, no refined sugar, no excess. She understood something modern science only confirmed much later. Physical habits shape mental and spiritual capacity. If you wake up late, eat junk, and don't move, your mind simply cannot operate at its peak. It's that simple. Real results. And now the moment you realize this wasn't just a beautiful theory. Ellen was directly instrumental in creating educational institutions that lasted for generations. Battle Creek College, one of the first integrated model schools in the U.S. Avondale College in Australia, where she applied the same principles. And the key point, Ellen was not an ivory tower leader. She visited classrooms constantly. She talked with students, gave feedback to teachers, adjusted the system in real time. She balanced discipline with encouragement. She wasn't lenient, but she wasn't oppressive either. She understood psychology before the word even existed. Here's what most people don't realize. Her impact wasn't immediate. It was generational. Students from these schools became teachers who replicated the model, missionaries with practical skills to sustain themselves, community leaders with solid character, parents who passed values to their children. It's a snowball effect. You invest in one young person today. In 20 years, they impact 50 people. In 40 years, 500. In 60 years, thousands. This is long-term thinking. Look, I know you're probably not building a school tomorrow. But here's the principle you need to understand. Real transformation doesn't come from hacks. It comes from formation. You want to change your financial life? It's not about finding the right investment. It's about building the character to make wise decisions for decades. You want to build a business? It's not about the idea. It's about building the discipline and skills to execute. You want to leave a legacy? It's not about going viral. It's about investing deeply in the people around you. Ellen understood this in 1870, and we in 2024 are still trying to figure it out. At the end of her life, she wrote something that gives me chills every time I read it. The work of education is sacred. The lives we touch now will bear fruit in eternity. Do you know why that's powerful? Because she wasn't thinking in quarterly results. She was thinking in centuries. So here's what I want you to do. First, stop chasing superficial solutions. If you want real change, invest in deep formation, character, skills, purpose. Second, think about who you can educate. Not formally, but who can you mentor? Who can you influence? A younger sibling? A coworker? Your own kids? Third, Build your own life curriculum. Ask yourself, what do I need to learn intellectually? What practical skills do I need to master? How do I cultivate my body and my health? What is my higher purpose? Ellen White answered these questions for an entire generation, and the impact lasted more than a century. Now it's your turn. If this video made you think differently, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, what's one area of your life where you need to stop chasing shortcuts and start investing in real formation? Thanks for watching. And remember, education is not about information. It's about transformation.